Because Capital Ford is celebrating 60 years in business, we're holding a very special signature sales event where we're rolling out our strongest offers of the year on every new Ford car, truck, and SUV in stock, like a new 2025 Ford Bronco Sport. Lease today for just $399 a month or 0% APR for 60 months, plus no payments for 90 days on a new 2025 Ford F-150. But hurry, this signature sales event is for a limited time at Capital Ford in Santa Fe.
Hey, welcome in to another live episode of the Pit Press Live. We're coming to you with a special edition of some basketball talk. As you can see, we got the one and only Geoff Grammer joining us this evening. Second half of the show, we'll have Nick Coppola from the Las Cruces Sun News also joining us. We're going to be talking UNM, New Mexico State hoops primarily on this show. But before we get started, let me get to the rest of the crew. I am your host for the evening, Eric Moulton, and joining me, Mr. Ed Nunez, the voice of the Western New Mexico Mustangs and a Lobo fan since 1970. Ed, what's up, man? How are you?
Hey, I'm good, doing good, Eric. It's great to have Geoff on with us. Looking forward to. He writes one. I just read his article today. Read everything he writes. I get the journal still in the paper version, so I'm old and I read it every day.
And the better looking of the duo of the Nunez crew, Mr. Nick Nunez. Nick, how's it going, man?
What's up, Eric, guys? Really glad to be with you tonight. Excited to have Geoff Grammer on to talk some Lobo basketball and ready to get into it.
And Mr. Geoff Grammer, the standard for sports journalism in Albuquerque and New Mexico with the Albuquerque Journal. Geoff, good evening. Thanks for joining us here on the Pit Press.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate the kind words on the intro there. I don't know about the standard. I just happen to be the guy with the good job now. I got the Lobo Hoops is still the best job in this state, and that's coming from an Aggie. So you can take it to the bank that the best sports gig in this state is the one I got, and I feel pretty lucky to have it.
Well, we don't have our own head cut out sitting in the student section at the Pit just yet. But before we jump into this, I know Ed had a special announcement or just wanted to talk a little bit about a former Lobo, and then we'll jump into some questions with Geoff.
Yeah, former Lobo Rich Pekorski played 72 to 1975, averaged 13 points, 6.7 rebounds his senior year. Heck of a player. Passed away last night from pancreatic cancer. Also won a state title with El Dorado in 1983. Only there 4 years. His record for coaching at 79 and 24. His daughters, Stacy and Becky, both played at La Cueva. His daughter, Stacy, now the head coach at Cleveland. So he was Rich was a heck of a player. I got to play ball against him a little bit. But a quote from Pat King, one of his teammates back in Pat King was a heck of a guard too. Rich Pokorski was one of the most competitive people I ever met. He won in high school, college, and won the first ever basketball state championship at El Dorado High School. Rich was a great person and friend, but most of all, he was a fantastic husband and father to his daughters, Becky and Stacy. Everyone respected Rich Pokorski, and he will be missed. And Mike Winters, the former Lobo, who was on our Lobo Legend series, also echoed that. Mike was the WAC freshman of the year in 1975 and played for Coach Pokorski, and said Rich was a great teacher and a great friend. He was with him at the end and said that Coach Pokorski had a very positive attitude about the life he had lived and was ready to move on. And I thought that was he had just found out he had pancreatic cancer and he was gone like that. But just wanted to mention Coach, Rich Pokorski, the former Lobo, will be missed.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with us, Ed. Get us started on the show, but we're going to transition into some Lobo hoops. Geoff, wanted to get some of your takes. Lobo basketball, obviously a lot of new faces. No one more recognizable than Coach Olin. The transition, how would you, at this point in the season, they're 3-0. We've been able to see him up close. You actually traveled to Washington State to watch the exhibition. How would you grade this team's adaptation to head coach Eric Olin's system, his philosophy, some of the non-con that you were able to witness, and now that we're in the regular season, how would you grade it so far?
It's a good question because obviously, we'd be lying if we said it's looked like a really efficient offense so far, because it hasn't. It's looked okay, but it certainly picked up the second half of that UT Arlington game. The overall numbers weren't bad Tuesday night offensively, but this isn't the offense we sort of thought we would be seeing. But if you watch it has been plays that look like a bunch of guys that haven't yet played together, right? And it has been a lot of mixed shots, rather, not mixed, but missed shots. Like it has looked like a team that was still getting good shots by design, which is what Eric Olin's offense does primarily. It really puts pressure on the rim and makes the defense make a decision, and is predicated on whatever that decision is. The response has to leave somebody open. So, that's an oversimplified kind of way to put it. But basically, it's an offense that leaves somebody open almost every time. And the Lobos haven't yet really capitalized on that. Now, that leads to the question, can they capitalize on it, right? If it was that easy, then everybody would be doing this. But I think they can. I do still think that this is a team that in general has good shooters, certainly average to above average, maybe not great shooters, but certainly I wouldn't say too many of these guys are below average shooters. I would say they're average to above average. And after 4 years of Richard Pitino, I think a lot of people want to see athleticism and Nelly Jr. Joseph guys and guys like Donovan Dent. Let's not forget Donovan Dent was a 3-star guy who couldn't shoot. But Donovan Dent had a lot of skills. I think people want to see the true Washingtons come in and the Nelly Jr. Josephs and these big athletes. What Eric Olin really built this entire roster, and he had to do it from scratch. So every one of these 14 players was built to fit a hole this year. He got skilled guys, and he got guys that he thought could shoot. So I don't think he missed on all that. I think that it doesn't have the over-the-top athletes, whereas Pitino might find a great athlete and figure out the best way to use him. I think Eric Olin has a system and puts the players into his system, and he was hired to run that system. So far, I'm not willing yet to bail on this idea that I think this is going to be a good three-point shooting team and an efficient offense. But I acknowledge that they haven't shown it yet, and we're now 5 games into this, right, with 2 exhibitions and 3 regular season games. They haven't lit it up on the scoreboard yet, but that's where I'm at offensively. Defensively, I'm impressed. I really am impressed that they're on the same page as much as they've been with their zone defense. And while they let a guy get loose on Tuesday night for 27 points, I would still say the overall grade I'd give them for defense has been, it would have to be an A for early on, just because I think their communication has been on point. And it might be with a curve because of the talent of the opposition and level of competition, but that is who they've played, and the sample size I've seen so far has been probably an A on defense.
Yeah, I think you make a good point, especially on the defensive side. It's one of those things that really, if you just kind of coach on the effort piece of it, you can clearly see that these guys are covering a lot of ground. They're applying a lot of pressure on ball. They're forcing a lot of guys into some tough situations to make quick decisions. But the offensive side, I think we kind of expected for them to shoot a little bit better. And I'm one to think that maybe you kind of fall into a regression or progression, that these guys are still good shooters, right? Like for the most of their careers, they've still been able to shoot from the 3-point line. But the offensive piece just hasn't entirely clicked yet. But focusing on the pace of play and the style, obviously with Patino's offense, he liked to play that fast pace, get out and run, and he did have the athletes to do that. This year's roster is a little bit different. Do you think the Lobos have kind of figured out Olin's desired pace of play? Do you think they're trying to play a little bit too fast? I feel like they have some speed guys like change the pace and Tenet and Albury, but sometimes they feel like they get a little bit too ahead of themselves. What do you feel about like the pace of play, pace of style?
Yeah, I'd say so far, first of all, I think the overall pace numbers and tempo numbers, when we start looking at ratings, people need to remember that the defensive rating, plays into the overall tempo, right? So when they're holding teams late into the shot clock pretty consistently because of that zone defense, and offenses are trying to figure out where to get their best shot, their defensive time of possession is going to be one of the best in the country or slowest in the country, depending on how you want to rank that. But offensively, I thought they'd be faster. Overall, I do think, though, I say that knowing that I think they've been sped up, and that's part of the problem with their offense. Like there are times when they go too fast and they aren't yet comfortable enough with knowing where someone else is going to be on the floor. And, you can see passes that instead of right in the chest are kind of just a little bit off or a little bit to the side. And I think that comes with knowing exactly where, when a guy's trailing in the lane, you know where he's going to be at in the lane. Just little things playing with each other. Some of that will step up. So I think that they've been at times sped up and they are playing too fast offensively. And yet I say that thinking that when they're at their best, I think they are going to be that kind of fast. I do think that they want to get out in transition. If you noticed, even their 5, Tomislav Buljan, is a guy that when he rebounds, he doesn't have to outlet. He can start taking it up the floor. And when you have all 5 guys on the floor, when they get a defensive rebound, can start dribbling and heading up court rather than an outlet pass or stop for a second to look for the point guard. I think this is a team kind of designed to try and get out in transition and maybe get a better shot early on. And I just don't think we've really seen that come to fruition just yet. So I think they can be faster. And I do, at the same time, I think their offense has struggled when they have gotten too fast. So they got to meet at some point here where I do think they need to play faster overall. But so far, their problems have been that they've sped up their offense a little too much.
Nick.
Yeah, Geoff, looking ahead to the New Mexico State game this Saturday, I think one of the biggest questions for Lobo fans is, are Dayton Albury and Uriah Tenet going to play? Do you have any update on that one way or the other?
Nothing official, but I'd be shocked if they don't play. They both went through the day of game shoot-arounds on Tuesday, and after that they decided Tenet wasn't going to go. And then as you guys saw, Dayton Albury did the warm-ups and was suited up and was available. This is I think both of them would have played in a Mountain West game. This is a non-conference early, maybe a little overlooking what was about 30 minutes of basketball of UC Riverside staying close with them. I think they just thought that was a game that they could get by without either one of those guys playing with some ankle injuries. And I do think that had this been a Mountain West game, both would have played, not just Dayton. I think both probably would have been playing in a bigger game. So I say that to say I'd be shocked if both of them aren't playing on Saturday against New Mexico State.
We're speaking with Geoff Grammer of the Albuquerque Journal. Geoff, one of the things that New Mexico State men's basketball is known for is their defense. I listened to your podcast with Jason Hooten that you had over this summer, and you were just talking about some of the defensive statistics that stand out for them. I think effective field goal percentage is what you mentioned, but I feel like this defense that UNM is going to face this Saturday may give the Lobos some problems. Things won't be as easy as they were against UC Riverside. Just talk about kind of what the Lobos can expect from New Mexico State defensively.
Yeah, I would say one of the concerns I would have of this Lobo team is, even with Dayton and Uriah in the game and in the lineup, would be who's going to break a press, who's going to be the ball handler when they're up in you defensively, and they will be at New Mexico State. Jason's teams are a defense that's going to give you're not going to have a lot of space, right? And this is a space-centric offense that you want space. You want shooters to have space. Jason Hooten's defense is going to get really close. You're not going to have a whole lot of space. So I think ball handling is a little bit of a concern, and Jason Hooten's team is going to pressure you. And then I do think too that rebounding is a question. Now, Tomislav Buljan's been great. He actually, not only is he averaging 10 rebounds a game, he's leading the Mountain West in offensive rebound rate. He has 15 offensive boards through 3 games, so he's averaging 5 offensive boards a game. I think that the 2 things I'd be concerned about. Let me give you 3. 3 things I'd be concerned about if you're the Lobos going into this game. That effective field goal percentage you mentioned, it's because Jason Hooten's teams don't give shooters much space. And I do think that this is an offense so far that hasn't exactly, lit it up offensively, right? And they need some space sometimes. I think their shooters need some space. So I would be concerned that it could be another poor shooting game for the Lobos. I would be concerned with the ball handling when they are being trapped. As the commenter just mentioned, who has proven yet to be the Jalen House or Donovan Dent one-man press break? You would guess it would be Dayton Albury, and you would guess it would be Uriah Tenet. I think they have decent ball handlers, like almost across the board. I don't think anybody's a horrible ball handler, but this is high pressure stuff that they're about to see. So who's the excellent ball handler or 2 on this team? And I think there's going to be times that, the pressure defense is going to get to them. So the ball handling could be a problem. They've been really good at not turning the ball over so far, have the Lobos. I think that could be an issue. And then rebounding, I do still think can be a concern. While Tomislav Buljan has been a fantastic individual rebounder, I think overall the Lobos probably still have some questions to answer. I mean, I don't think we know yet if they're going to be a decent rebounding team or a good rebounding team or just maybe a decent one. I don't think they're going to fall below decent rebounding because I think their guards are all big enough that they'll get decent rebounding out of the guard play. So they'll be fine. Like, I don't think they're going to be a horrible rebounding team because they do have one excellent rebounder. We know that in Tomislav Buljan. I think Antonio Chol at times can be a really good, probably excellent rebounder. And then I think all the guards can be decent rebounders. So I don't think they'll be horrible at rebounding. But, man, I think there's going to be a few games this year. You got to worry about the Boise States and the San Diego States. And those guys maybe, winning a rebounding margin by 10 boards against the Lobos. I did look just earlier today, and I thought it's funny. The sample size is so small that it's not worth looking too much into. But as of right now, there are 2 teams in the Mountain West that have a 0 rebounding margin, a rebounding differential. The Lobos are at 108 rebounds, and their opponents are at 108, so they're right at 0. The other team is San Diego State, who has 60 rebounds, and their opponents have 60. Now, they've only played 2 games, but they're even. They're not beating up on lesser teams on the boards just yet either. So, the sample size is too small to read too much into this, because if you did read too much into those kind of stats, you'd say, wow, San Diego State, they're even with teams. I'm sure San Diego State by the end of the year will have a higher rebounding margin than 0.
You mentioned the rebounding, and you mentioned Chol and Buljan, who's doing a great job. I thought he gave them a great inside presence. Points in the paint, 52-10. You wrote about that in your article today. Coach Olin's always talking about 2 feet in the paint, getting the best looks. And I thought, and I said this to my son and to Eric, that New Mexico, you saw the pit pop a little bit. We didn't see that a lot. But a wilted team, UC Riverside, got tired. They got tired, didn't defend, straight line drives, and I thought the pit came to life. They talked about Kevin Patton's athleticism. His dunk might have been the best of the night as far as, and the pit loves that. Physical hustle, diving on loose balls. I thought I was very encouraged by that. Were you surprised at all? You mentioned this in your article today, empty in the notebook, that they only turned it over 5 times without 2 of their best point guards, which I thought, and you mentioned it hadn't happened since 2024. How impressed were you with that?
That if there's anything that's impressed me more than anything, like just statistically speaking, right, I'd probably say it's that turnover rate from especially from Tuesday night, because Dayton and Uriah were gone. If you looked early on, I mean, Luke Hopt, I think, played a fantastic game. But if you would have told me before that game that Luke Hopt, Chris Howell were going to be your primary ball handlers down the stretch against a team like UC Riverside that isn't great defensively, but they do play a style that gets up in you a little bit, I never would have taken any prop bet that said five turnovers or fewer I thought they would have turned it over a whole lot more than that, and they didn't. And it's interesting. You could have turnovers that are more than just a defender getting in front of you, right, or getting up into you. There are also turnovers of confusion on defense, which is what you see opponents of the Lobos doing a lot right now. That whole make them make a second decision or do the second thing, as Chris Howell has described it. When you see opposing teams having to think a lot on offense, sometimes that leads to just accidentally picking up your foot, hesitating just a second on a pass. Stuff like that leads to some of the turnovers that this Lobo defense is creating. I did think some of that might happen to the Lobos with Tennette and Albury out, and I didn't see that. The struggles that maybe there were some early on for the Lobos weren't really because of confusion or anything. So yeah, I was shocked that they only had 5 turnovers without Albury and without Tennette out there.
You mentioned, and this is going to take a while, Eric Olin's offense and system trust. They're running it. It's exhibition. They run it in the offseason. It's going to take a little bit of time to get this group together where they trust each other. But with the lots of leadership like Donovan Dent, who in your opinion has emerged as a primary vocal leader and floor general, and how effective have they been in that role?
I still think it's going to be, so this isn't exactly answering your question. I still think it's going to be Dayton Albury kind of running it while on the court. But, man, you can't ignore and you can't not see on the court the way Luke Hopp kind of controls things when he's out there, or at least tries to. But Chris Howell in particular, Chris Howell is a coach on the floor. He's only a fourth-year senior, and he already kind of seems like one of these guys who was a sixth-year guy. Luke Hopp happens to be a sixth-year guy. Like, Chris Howell has the feel of a guy who's been playing college basketball for 5-6 years. And he is a guy that's going to be a coach. And he doesn't look like the most athletic guy out there. And that's why the teammates all gave him a hard time when he had that dunk. And I thought that was great, by the way. When he had that dunk and everybody reacted the way they did, you could tell how much love they have for him. But I think Chris Howell is the leader, the player leader. But I think he's a leader that will certainly take a step back to Dayton Albury running the show as a point guard when Dayton Albury comes back. So I think Chris Howell's leadership comes in a way where a lot like Hugh Greenwood, where every single game he will find a different stat that he needs to do to help that game. Hugh Greenwood would have 3 steals in a game when they needed to turn the other team over. Hugh Greenwood would have 6 assists in a game when that's what was needed. He'd have 5 or 6 rebounds in a game when that was what was needed. I think Chris Howell's going to be that guy that kind of from game to game, whatever they need that game, Chris Howell's probably going to end up being a guy that those numbers that they needed that game, Chris Howell's numbers go up with that. And I think that's where his leadership is going to be, is he understands this offense, this scheme, and this team so well that he's just going to figure out what is needed from game to game. And I think he's probably the leader by default in that regard.
You mentioned one quick comment about Chris Howell turning over to Eric. 14 points in the paint the other night. He was so confident. JT Rock had his man posted up. He waves him off, goes in the lane. And look, I got to say this as I've been around a lot of basketball. I wouldn't say he's the most effective. Or you look at him, you're like, man, he doesn't jump that high. But they gave a lot of head fakes the other night. And you see Riverside being tired, fell for a lot of them. They drew a lot of fouls. So the paint, they owned that. You mentioned that in your article, 52-10. Eric.
Yeah, Geoff, you kind of just talked about some of the bigger names, the guys that are going to carry the torch for this Lobo squad. But maybe some of the guys we didn't necessarily expect, like who to you would be, I know it's early in the season, but kind of one of those surprise players that has played really well that maybe no one really expected to have as much impact on a game as they have so far.
I'll jump off with right off the bat, I'll say it's a starter. So by this point, maybe it shouldn't be a surprise or an unheralded guy. But if I'd listened to Dayton Albury talk up Jake Hall all preseason, I wouldn't be surprised. But I thought he was full of it. I thought he was just being nice to a teammate. Jake Hall is proven to me to be more than just a guy who's just going to catch and shoot. I'm not saying he's a finished product by any means. He is a true freshman who's played 3 college games. He's got a lot of growing to do. But Jake Hall is going to be a volume shooter on this offense, and he is going to be a guy that averages double figures as a true freshman in the Mountain West. And if you look at history, that puts you right in the conversation for Mountain West Freshman of the Year. And I think that Jake Hall has impressed me because I do think he can handle D1 basketball as a starting shooting guard in this offense anyway. I think he's a great fit. Uriah Tennette is also impressed me, not just because of the dunk contest, but because I think he can play. I think those two true freshmen who didn't get recruited heavily by anybody, and part of that's because they committed last November to Eric Olin at UC San Diego. And who's going to go try and steal a UC San Diego Big West recruit, right? That doesn't happen very often. So nobody was trying to get these guys, even though they both had great senior years. We're talking Jay Call had 3,000 points scored in high school. Uriah Tenet had 2,700 points scored in high school. These guys had great high school careers, and nobody was really going after them too heavily. I think both of them have proven already that they can play at the D1 level. Some guys off the bench that I would say both ways, impressed and maybe disappointed in. I thought Milos Vicentić would be a better contributor than he was, just because he was with the team last year. Haven't seen enough out of him to say I'm impressed with what he's done. JT Rock in really limited minutes. I've liked the minutes he's played, but he has played less than 10 minutes in a lot of these games. And I don't know why that is. I think these coaches are really smart about how they're using their guys. So I'm guessing it's because he has shown to them that once he starts playing into that 15-minute range or something, his production goes down. So we'll see as the season goes on. But his minutes on the floor, I've really liked JT Rock. I do think he's a little slow in the post offensively, but I think he's a good defensive presence and a good fit for a face-up big man, even though he's a 7'1". And then one other guy, Tajavis Miller, is a guy that looked impressive in one game, and I kind of still expect to hit some more threes moving forward. So I'm waiting to see more from Tajavis Miller. I do like what I've seen from JT Rock. Those are two bench guys that I really like, and Uriah Tenet's a bench guy. But I guess overall, I'd say I'm most impressed that J. Call absolutely looks the part of a shooting guard in the Mountain West to me.
We talked about Hall after the first one or two games that we saw him play, and he just looks really poised out there to be a freshman, right? Like, just played a ton of minutes. I think he scored over 3,000 points in high school, but coming in, I think the expectation was he's going to be a catch and shoot guy, but he's gotten a lot of mid-range shots in and finishing around the basket, pump fakes, step throughs, ball fakes, just really smart, savvy player, something that you wouldn't expect from a freshman. And I think the irony in all of this and like the transfer portal era is that everyone's going after those seasoned guys, the guys that have 2 or 3 seasons under their belt already, to where the Lobos have these 2 freshmen that are impact players right away that are really excelling early in their career. So I think the sky's the limit with those guys. But going back to the front court, the rotation, the big dude. So you have Bullion, who's been dominating the boards, could potentially be a consistent double-double guy for this Lobo squad. And then you mentioned Rock and then Vicentić. Not a whole lot of depth there. Is that something that kind of concerns you? I feel like last year's squad, you had Nelly, but then there was just kind of a big drop off if Nelly were to get into foul trouble. Right. I mean, what's your take there with the overall depth and being able to compete with other bigs around the Mountain West?
They don't have the depth in the front court that a San Diego State and a Boise State are going to have. The success of this team will have to come not from depth in the front court, but from not having to give in to an opposing team's style, right? So depth in the front court doesn't matter if a team that does have depth in the front court and a bunch of big men, if they can't impose that on you, then it doesn't matter. But San Diego State, Boise State, they have a culture of imposing their front courts on teams and on opponents. So I think it's going to be difficult. I think there are going to be some games that front court matters, and the lack of who's the guy that's going to come in and rebound after Tomislav, right? Is it going to be JT Rock? Is he going to have to play more than 10 minutes a game? He probably will in some instances. Milos Vicentić is a guy that I still think is going to have to get bigger minutes at times. And then Antonio Chol. I do think he can rebound. We'll see how many games he sort of disappears out at the 3-point line a little bit. Again, looking back to like Mustafa Amzil from the previous 2 seasons, when he disappeared and hung out at the 3-point line, maybe a Vance Jackson, if you want to go back a little bit further, when those big guys disappeared at the 3-point line, it didn't help the rebounding. But both of those guys were actually decent rebounders. And I think Antonio Chol can be as well. And it would be nice to see in games when needed, him go down there and really help that rebounding load, because Tomislav isn't going to be able to do it by himself. All season. He's going to get in foul trouble. He may turn an ankle and miss a couple weeks or something like that. There's things like that happen. And when that does, I don't know exactly where the rebounding is going to come from out of that front court.
Yeah, it's going to be a group effort. Nick, did you have a question?
Just one more for you, Geoff. One of the things that I think people talk about is his Lobo team just hasn't really faced a lot of competition. They got challenged against UC Riverside. New Mexico State, I know the net hasn't come out yet. I think it comes out in early December. But New Mexico State, maybe a quad 3, maybe a quad 2, depending on how they play this year, could be. But looking ahead to the MTE that the Lobos will be in next week, do you think the Lobos have a chance to win a game or two next week?
Because of their defense is still a confused, catch a team off guard kind of defense. I wouldn't say they don't have a chance. So, yeah, I'd say they have a chance. But, man, their offense can't continue to struggle, right? Like, if UC Riverside was their best offensive game, they got a ways to go offensively to make me think that they're going to go into an MTE and beat some power conference teams, right? But I do think defensively, if Nebraska can't figure out that zone, well, then yeah, they'll be in it till the end. And if Mississippi State's had some struggle, like I think all the teams in that MTE, I don't think any of them are so elite that even on a bad night they'll just beat the Lobos. So yeah, I think they have a chance. I don't think they'll be favored in any game. I think that's safe to say. I don't think they'll be favored in the MTE, regardless of which team they play on the second day, and I don't think they'll be favored against Nebraska. But I do think that the defense alone gives them a chance at a win in either day. And I would add that like I said earlier, I might end up being the last guy on this island at some point because they're going to have to prove it. But I still think the offense will come around, and it hasn't yet. So when this offense does start firing on all cylinders, there's going to be runs where they hit a couple threes really quick, and Dayton Albury is flying around the court and penetrating and finishing at the rim and drawing fouls. That through 3 games, the fact that they've only had 1 kill shot, and kill shots are that stat 10-0 runs or better, they've only had 1 of those so far. I'm a little surprised by that. I think this is a team that, because of their shooting, you just put up a couple threes back to back and maybe have a couple defensive stops. Like, you can get to 10-0 pretty quick with this offense if it's hitting shots, and I think it will at some point. So to answer your question about the MTE, I don't think they'll be favored in any game they play, but I do think that they have a chance against all 3 of those opponents because none of those 3 have really wowed me so far either.
I got one more question for you, Geoff, and then we'll cut to a quick commercial break and let you go. But general season outlook, right? The big picture. I know we're only 3 games in, and we're still in November, but the NCAA tournament path, I think the out of conference schedule was a little bit knocked on, not a whole lot of strength there. So they're going to have to find their way to win the Mountain West or somehow do that. But what do you think the path is? Right now they're sitting at number 95 in the Ken Palm. I think they're like at 98 in the Evan Maya rankings too. Not real strong. And then even looking around the Mountain West, some teams that you thought that might be a little bit stronger, like a UNLV, a Boise State, they've had some big losses this year that have kind of shocked some people. But what do you think the path is, right, to the NCAA tournament? Lobo fans are a little impatient. They want this team to go back to the tourney.
Yeah, their wins are going to have to be against, right now, statistically, it looks like Utah State, Boise State, and San Diego State, of course. I think Colorado State, metrics-wise, might be a good enough win where you're going to have to get some of those wins. But those are your 4 opportunities in league play that you better go win some road games against those 4. You got to knock one of those off. An MTE win certainly would help. Obviously, VCU and Santa Clara are 2 opponents that I do think will help them metrically. I think Santa Clara, by the way, for those that see the name Santa Clara and don't know, Santa Clara is pretty good. You saw what they did to Xavier. Like, that's a good team. They have a lot of NIL money too. But look, I think there is still a path for the Lobos, but yeah, they don't have much margin for error, that's for sure. And they haven't squandered it yet. They haven't done what Boise State did against the D2. They haven't lost like Grand Canyon. They haven't lost twice like UNLV. They're doing what they need to so far. But yeah, they're gonna have to get some of the big trophies at some point too, and that means knocking off Boise or San Diego State and Viejas, and they're gonna have to pull off a couple of the really big upsets on the road at some point. Otherwise, they're gonna have to win the tournament, which Mountain West tournament, maybe they can do that, but it will be difficult with this non-conference to get an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament.
You mentioned going on the road, and New Mexico has their first road test and going to Las Cruces this Saturday. You mentioned they're going to get pressured defensively, but also a hostile environment in the Hampton Center. What's your take on their mental readiness to handle a hostile environment like Las Cruces. And, it's been more hostile in the past, but still, Lobos are coming in, and the Aggie fans should be at full throat.
I think one of the best things going for the Lobos is that UNM, or the NMSU rather. Wow, did I just pull one of the mix-ups there? NMSU has not yet faced a D1 opponent. It's the second Saturday of the season. They haven't played a D1 team. That means something to me. They didn't play. They played Tuesday without their starting forward, their 6'9" guy. He's apparently out of concussion protocol and should be playing. But I don't know how ready for the season and how ready for a big matchup New Mexico State's going to be. But their style, I do think, causes problems for UNM. As far as being ready for the crowd, I think that student section is going to be relentless on the Lobos, because that's what a New Mexico State student section will do really to any opposing fan base, but especially New Mexico. They hate that team up north, right? And the Aggies do not like that team up north, and they're going to give it to them pretty good. But you're looking at a Lobo team as a 23-year-old freshman in Tomislav Buljan, who just played in the Croatian Pro League. I don't think he's going to care that much what the student section is going to say. Chris Howell, I think, is going to just relish it. They've not played in an environment like this, so I can't tell you for sure how they're going to react. But if I had to guess, a 6-year guy like Luke Hopp probably isn't going to get too rattled. Dayton Albury, who played in the Spectrum at Utah State last year and has played in Viejas and at Boise State and in the pit as an opposing player, I just don't think many of the guys on this team are going to get rattled. But let's see what happens to maybe the younger guys. What happens to Jake Hall? What happens to Uriah Tenet when they need minutes out of him if he's back? Let's see what happens to those guys. But as far as the veterans, this is a pretty old UNM team. They're brand new, all 14 of them, but they are an old new team. There's a lot of 22, 23, and 24-year-olds. This looks like an old BYU team, yet none of these guys went on a mission. And I just think that this is an old team that probably won't care what the opposing fan base does a whole lot. But you're going to need some shots from Jake Hall, so let's see how the freshman handles it.
He is Geoff Grammer, beat writer, UNM basketball for the Albuquerque Journal. Geoff, thanks again, man. We appreciate you jumping on the Pit Press. It's been a long time, and we haven't had you on yet, so glad you were able to finally join us. And I think you might link up with Nick. Nick's going to head to Las Cruces and cover that game for us. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, Ed, Nick, and I will be joined by Nick Coppola from the Las Cruces Sun News and hopefully get a breakdown in New Mexico State basketball. So we will be right back.
Because Capital Ford is celebrating 60 years in business, we're holding a very special signature sales event where we're rolling out our strongest offers of the year on every new Ford car, truck, and SUV in stock, like a new 2025 Ford Bronco Sport. Lease today for just $399 a month or 0% APR for 60 months, plus no payments for 90 days on a new 2025 Ford F-150. But hurry, this signature sales event is for a limited time at Capital Ford in Santa Fe.
Welcome back to the Pit Press Live. I am Eric Bolton, joined by Nick Nunez, Ed Nunez. Guys, what'd you think about Geoff? Ed, I'm going to start with you.
It was great to have him on. Like I said, I read his articles every day, emptying the notebook today. I'm really glad he came on. He's with the team. Nick reminds me of that every day. He's got 20,000 Twitter followers. He said it himself, the best job in as far as media covering global basketball. So I thought, the questions you came up with and some of the other ones we asked about the team and where they're at right now in the season. Although I'll say this, I don't see them as a good shooting team yet. Maybe we'll see that later down the way, but I'm glad a couple of people commented. It was great to have a collaboration between the Albuquerque Journal and the Pit Press. So we're glad to have them on.
Yeah, glad we were able to finally do that. Nick, you're going to be in Las Cruces later this week. I think you're also doing some stuff with Western New Mexico the same day. So you are going to be a busy guy. What'd you think of Geoff?
I was really glad that he agreed to come on, Eric, and just the wealth of knowledge that he brought to the show. I agree with a lot of what Geoff said, specifically about how this team is going to, have to rely on its defense. It's kept them in games, and it's been consistent. They had one guy get hot on them, Andrew Henderson from UC Riverside. I think he finished with 27 points, shot 7 of 13 from 3. But outside of that, Eric, their defense has been phenomenal. I agree with all of Geoff's points on that and many others. Just really glad that he came on.
Yeah, likewise, man. I don't want to keep our guests waiting backstage, but we are going to be joined by Nick Coppola from the Las Cruces Sun News. Nick Coppola, thanks for joining us on the Pit Press, man. How are you?
Doing good. How about you?
Doing good. I want to congratulate you, man. I saw that you had gotten an award over the summer. Was it over the summer or towards the beginning of the year? You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, over the summer. So it was for the 2024 Associate Press Sports Editors Awards. I won a first place award for a breaking news story, which had to do with my breaking news piece on Tyler Wright stuff last year, the former New Mexico State offensive coordinator who got fired for a bunch of stuff on his social media. So I got an award off that. And I also got, I think, 5th place on just general beat writing. So just for my coverage overall of New Mexico State. So that was pretty fun. Both of those in Division D based on circulation.
Well, congratulations again, man.
Thank you.
We're just joined by Geoff Grammer, and I know that you had Geoff on your first podcast earlier in the week, which we listened to. So very cool, man. But I want to get started, jump right into it. NMSU basketball, I know they're 2-0 on the year, but they haven't faced any D1 opponents yet. So I just wanted to get your kind of overall analysis, giving Hooten an early grade in the season, establishing consistent culture system. You've been around the program more than I have. So what is your take?
Yes, it's kind of hard to tell how good they really are so far. I mean, like you said, they haven't played a Division One team yet. So they played Adams State and then they played New Mexico Highlands. They played better defense, I think, against Highlands than they did against Adams State. They held Highlands to under 60. Would have had a little bit of a greater margin of victory if Highlands didn't make a buzzer beat shot there at the end of the game. So they ended up winning by 16 instead of just 19. But yeah, I mean, but again, it's kind of hard to tell because they haven't really faced the stiffest competition yet, and there's still a lot of new guys, just like New Mexico has. So they're still trying to get a feel of who are some of the guys that they can lean on or rely on and things like that. You could probably name some based off some of the transfers and who has been in the lineup the last 2 games. But overall, in Hooten's tenure, I've covered his second year last year, and now I'm on his third. I thought last year was definitely an improvement off his first year. That he improved the win total. The team was better. They finished with a winning record. And this year, they look to have a better team. They're predicted 3rd in Conference USA this year, which is a lot better than their 7th place predictions, or they were picked to finish 7th in both. their first year in the conference and their second year in the conference. So definitely a lot of hype, at least for conference coaches that pick the poll for how good the Aggies are going to be this year. And I do think top to bottom, the roster this year is better than it was last year. Definitely a lot more scoring. They really struggled to score last year, but they got a lot more scores this year that I believe will show in time. And yeah, I mean, obviously, this Saturday is going to be a big first test for them. I mean, not only are they facing their first Division I team, it's New Mexico for the first Division I team. So I don't like how that schedule turned out for them, but that's just kind of how it went for them, I guess.
Yeah, Nick, wanted to ask you about Jamel Jones, the guard for New Mexico State, averaging, I believe, 23 points per game for the Aggies. Cal State Bakersfield transfer, I think he averaged 18.9 points per game, was the Big West newcomer of the year. So Eric Olin has coached against him. Tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, he was their marquee transfer addition from the offseason. He set multiple scoring records there at Bakersfield, mostly single season. His 18.9 points per game was a school record. He also, his 625 total points was also a school record. His made field goals were also a school record as well. Yeah, he was not only newcomer of the year for the Big West, but he also made the All Big West team, second team, I believe. So yeah, definitely came in with a lot of pedigree. We got some power conference interest, but chose to come to New Mexico State, and he was exactly what they're looking for. If you're a team that struggled to score last year, and New Mexico State was a team that had arguably the worst scoring offense in Conference USA last season. Scoring is what they really needed, and so they needed a guy like Jamel Jones, and he certainly made a great first impression. 23 against Am State in the opener, 24 on Tuesday against New Mexico Highlands. So he's already proven that he can score, over 20 points in both of his games so far for the Aggies. That's going to be pretty good. He's someone that they're probably going to lean on throughout the season, and definitely someone that the Lobos are gonna need to stop if they want to play some good defense on Saturday.
Tell me a little bit about some of the other guys, Nick. They got a lot of transfers, 13 newcomers to this team. Sair Malonga, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name. And then the forward that Geoff Grammer was mentioning earlier on our show, I think it's Julius Mims. He was out against New Mexico Highlands. Those guys were both in double figures against Adams State. Just talk about, some of their other players.
Yeah, Julius Mims is probably their a marquee transfer in the forward edition, probably the best forward on the roster right now. He comes from Idaho, was a really good defensive player at Idaho in the 2023-24 season. Excuse me. He made the All Big Sky defensive team there at Idaho. He also led Idaho in both of his seasons there in blocks. So definitely comes with a lot of defensive pedigree. And he says he could be a two-way player as well as really stretch the floor, shoot the ball well. He shot around 33% from three-point range in his first season at Idaho, 25% in his second year. But he did pretty well scoring the ball against Adams State. Like you said, yeah, he missed the Highlands game, sat out with a concussion. He did get out of concussion protocol heading into the Highlands game, but the doctor didn't clear him. But he did return to a normal practice schedule today, so he should be on track to play Saturday, and you should see him out there in the starting lineup. And Sair Malonga, he comes from East Carolina, another guy that they're probably going to lean on a lot. He's their tallest player on the roster at 6'11". Playing a lot is something he's going to have to really get used to because he did not really do that at East Carolina over his 2 seasons there. I think he only averaged about 8 minutes a game. He did start a few games, but overall didn't play that much. But he's playing a lot now for New Mexico State. Probably his biggest weakness right now is free throws. He missed 7 against Am State. I believe he missed 4 against New Mexico Highlands. And his defensive rebounding numbers can probably be a little bit higher considering, he is the tall post man down there. You expect a little bit more out of him. But, he's been a good scorer so far this season. I think he had 16 against Am State. If you have a post man that could score 16 a game and get you in double figures, that's pretty good. So, he's someone who can make quite an impression this season.
Kind of the same tale as New Mexico, Nick. New team, new roster. Not sure what to expect. You had to look against New Mexico Highlands. I mentioned Coach September at Highlands has 45 guys on his roster. Not all 45 were there, but that's what we heard. But, I got to ask you, the current mood and energy at the Pan American Center, has the team's early performance generated the necessary local excitement to rebuild the program's passionate fan base? Now, I expect them to be at full throat on Saturday, but what has the fan base been like so far?
Yeah, I mean they're a little bit optimistic. They would like to see the team play, a little bit better. Adams State and Highlands both kind of were in the fight a little bit in those games. They only led Highlands by 5 at halftime, and then they took care of business in the second half to win the game by double digits. But overall, I think there's coming into the season, I think there was excitement about the transfers that they got, the newcomers that were on the team, especially the fact that they actually had some returners, in Gabe Pickens at guard and Jacoby Osborne at forward. Both of them showed flashes of what they had. They could, of course, get better, especially Gabe Pickens. He turned over the ball quite a bit last year in the minutes that he got. So he has to get better at that. But overall, I think, I do think a majority of the fan base is confident in the direction that they're heading in. I do think the fans that are they know that this was not a normal rebuild, coming in and for what Jason Hooten had to have and what he had to handle. But I do think especially last year when the win totals improved, the team looked better, and now you got a better roster this year. I think there's been a little bit of impatience, a little bit. Obviously, this is a program that used to make the tournament every single season, and they were still really good, always winning the conference. And they're not quite at that level right now, but they needed time to get there, considering what happened. So yeah, I do think that there's a little optimism from fans about how the program is trending, and yeah, I mean you're certainly going to see a lot of them Saturday. UNM is their biggest home draw of the season for sure.
Yeah, that should be interesting. Which player has been the most crucial addition to the roster this season, not just statistically, but in terms of leadership or stabilizing that rotation that you mentioned? Who's that player to you?
Yeah, for me, I know we already talked about him. I do think it's Jamel Jones. I do think he is the scorer that the Aggies really kind of lacked last year. Not that they didn't have anyone that can score the basketball, but Jamel Jones is definitely the scorer that they didn't have last year. Anthony Bristech, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name, has been an under the radar transfer. He played at a Canadian school last year, McMaster. I don't know where it is in Canada, but that's where he played. But he's familiar with Jason Hooten's system. He did play under Jason Hooten at Sam Houston in the 2022-23 season. So he's familiar with what he wants to do. Jason Hooten loves him. He has talked multiple times now about how he just thinks he's a very smart basketball player, that he knows everything. His IQ is pretty high. So it makes sense why he's been in the starting lineup twice now. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that on Saturday. So he's someone that, maybe doesn't have maybe the pedigree that, or kind of maybe experience in, that maybe Jamel Jones or, Julius Mims have in terms of, playing a lot. But he's still a good guy to watch. So, Jamel is probably the headline guy, but Anthony Bristech, I'm really looking out for him.
Yeah, Nick, well, we all know we talk a lot of hoops on here, but basketball is a team sport, man, and considering like the significant roster turnover, the same thing that UNM is facing, you just named Jamil Jones, a few other select individuals. How would you evaluate overall? I know it's early in the season, but just the team chemistry, the on-court cohesion that kind of developed so far. And I mean, is it solidified? Do you feel like there's a lot of room for growth there kind of heading into maybe the conference season, that you could see this team really take off? I mean, being picked third preseason is a pretty good spot to be at, but do you think there's a lot of room for growth with this team?
I do, yeah, and you certainly weren't going to see it in the first 2 games, considering there was a lot of new players, and the majority of the stars are of course going to be guys who are all playing with each other for the first time, because there's only 2 people that are coming back from last year's team. So it's definitely something that can be improved. You can see a lot more growth there, and I think that will happen over the course of the season. I think from now and when they get into conference play at the end of December, you'll see 2 different teams. You'll see a progression. You'll see a growth. I mean, it's important to be more improved than they have been in their first 2 games against UNM, especially in a game of this magnitude. But yeah, I mean, they're still trying to get some chemistry, and especially on the defensive end. Hooten, he's been known for his defensive teams and that kind of style of play, and they're maybe not quite where they want to be at, or where Hooten wants them to be at defensively. But they were better in the Highlands game compared to they were in the Adams State game. And I believe you will see more of that progression game by game week by week before they enter conference play. So yeah, definitely a lot of room for growth, but that's to be expected for New Mexico State with the amount of newcomers, and also for New Mexico, but completely new coaches and completely new players as well.
Yeah, we're still trying to find out what the UNM's roster is going to look like in terms of rotation, how many guys are going to play, who are going to be the go-to guys, who's going to kind of fit where. But how would you evaluate this roster overall, like depth-wise? Is there anybody that you would anticipate kind of exceeding expectations, maybe be like a sixth man of the year, or maybe someone that would kind of play, well, not necessarily like Robin to Jamil Jones Batman, but someone else who could probably carry the torch and get you some buckets if you needed them?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think they're certainly trying to find who that guy exactly is yet. But I will say for Jalen Randall has played quite a lot so far. He's one of their many transfers that they had. He's a guard. He's a senior. He comes from Southern Indiana. He's one that's played a lot. I believe he's got the fifth most minutes on the team so far. He's averaging 5.5 points a game off the bench through those first 2 games. So he's a guy that you can look at. Chris Terrell averaged over 20 a game at Delta State. It is a Division II school, but does come with a lot of scoring pedigree. But last year one of their key guys was Zodie Jackson, and he came from he was a pretty good player at the Division II level before coming up and starting for New Mexico State. So it's definitely something that's not unfamiliar with New Mexico State, especially under Jason Hooten. It'll be interesting to see what Kyrie Smolin has in store. He hasn't played that much so far, but he did shoot, I believe, around 45% over his 3 years at Hampton. So he's someone that could shoot the ball. So that's someone that I was keeping an eye on, but maybe Jason Hooten is seeing something else in practice. But yeah, those are a few guys maybe that could come off the bench and play well, and they're still looking for that right now. Something that I remember Jason Hooten saying in his Wednesday presser that he wants to see guys, or at least 3 of his starters, kind of average in double figures, but he also wants to see maybe 3 or 4 other guys behind them in that kind of 7 to 10 range in terms of points. So that way, if somebody else is off, they have guys that they can rely on in terms of depth. That's something that they didn't have last year. I remember the UTEP game when they played UTEP last year in Las Cruces. Peter Filipovich, who was their best player last year, he had the flu, and that was like one of maybe 2, 3 guys that they could rely on. And without him, the kind of fell apart and they lost that game. So they don't want that to happen. They don't want that to happen this year. They got to build out more of the depth, and I think they're still trying to see who they can rely on. Behind the top guys like Jamel, Julius, Malonga, things like that.
Yeah, Nick, wanted to ask you real quick about New Mexico State's non-conference schedule. I listened to Jason Hooten's press conference. I think it was yesterday. He just talked about how they struggled to really get Division I teams to come into their building. They got to open the season with 2 Division II opponents. What have been the challenges for New Mexico State in filling out their schedule?
Jason Hooten mentioned resources and just the fact that they maybe haven't been able to go out and spend the money to get teams to come play in Las Cruces, or even to find teams willing to come to Las Cruces to play. And really, New Mexico was the only team that agreed to do that. I know that was part of a kind of a larger agreement, but they only play one other D1 team at home this year, and that's Sanford. But the reason that game happened is because of the agreement as part of the larger Cancun Challenge that they were able to get into, which is their neutral site kind of tournament that they're into. So they were able to get that as part of a larger agreement with more than just Stanford. So yeah, they play Highlands, Adams State. They'll play University of Southwest at home as well. But yeah, not really many marquee home games out of conference, apart from probably this one this Saturday. And their non-conference schedule is pretty weird overall. They'll play 2 neutral site games in Texas. I believe they'll play South Alabama and Katy, Texas, which is a Houston suburb. And they'll play Tulsa and Frisco, which is, of course, around Dallas-Fort Worth. And then they have a return game against Abilene Christian in Abilene, which was part of a home and home. Yeah, just really unfortunate that they were not able to get that. Last year they were able to get some light. I remember the second game of the season was against Texas A&M Corpus Christi, which is a decent mid-major program that's a good home game to get, and they weren't able to, and of course they played Abilene Christian as well. They weren't able to get games like that this year. I think it hurts them, because it's not ideal, playing UNM as your first Division I opponent. A game of this magnitude this early in the season is also a rivalry game and your first Division I team. So I don't like that. I don't like how that played out. It kind of happened because of circumstances out of their control, or maybe they just didn't get teams to come play, or they just didn't have the money for that. But yeah, just really, really unfortunate.
We're speaking with Nick Coppola of the Las Cruces Sun News. Nick, wanted to ask you, what does a hostile environment look like in the Pan Am Center? I'm not sure what their attendance numbers have been the first couple games. I don't know what they were last year. Obviously when the Aggies came to the Pit last year in December, you were there, I think. That was a sellout, I'm pretty sure. I don't imagine the Pan Am Center will be sold out, but what kind of crowd and what kind of environment do you expect?
Yeah, so I remember them playing UTEP last year at home. That was the one game where they had double digits in the crowd. They reported other home games that were double digits attendance, but there weren't. UTEP was the only one that's on my mind that was like, okay, they actually filled up a large majority of the seats. And it was really rowdy for that one. The atmosphere was a little bit different. It was more loud. People got in really early, so it wasn't like people were trickling in at the last minute. And some were, but it was mostly full from the very beginning. And yeah, that's a rivalry game, and so that the atmosphere was really great for that. Of course, most NMSU fans see UNM as a bigger rival, so I imagine it's going to be that plus a little bit more this Saturday. I don't think it's like the Pit. I was there at the Pit last year. I mean, that's got to be one of the best atmospheres I've ever been in for college basketball. That's a really good place to watch a basketball game, to have a home game, and things like that. I don't think the Pan Am is going to match that from last year, but I still think it's going to be a very, very rowdy crowd. It's their only kind of marquee non-conference home game of the season, and it's against New Mexico. So if the fans don't show out, that'll be pretty disappointing. And the reason that it's this early in the season is because Jason Newton and New Mexico State wanted to make sure that people, especially New Mexico State students, could show up, and that they wouldn't be bogged down by Thanksgiving break or finals or things like that they could all be there and that they could show up in full force. So I do expect that. I do expect, especially the student section, to be very rowdy. And, in terms of home attendance, according to Conference USA, they averaged 5,200 a game last year. That ranked second in the conference, but of course the Pan Am can seat like 14,000 or something like that. So 5,000 doesn't look like that much in a building that big. But in terms of just who they're competing with in the conference, it's one of the highest. They were only beat out by UTEP last year.
You could always look forward to I did, home and away here, and then at the Pan Am Center. If we Lobos New Mexico lost last year here at the Pit, and there wasn't a chance, for revenge at the Pan Am Center, they changed it to one game a year. Now I got to ask you this: you said, do you think? Now, for me, I remember, I'm the oldest guy on this panel by far, and I remember, a lot of those rivalry games here and at the Pan Am Center. Has a rivalry lost a little bit? I thought it kind of had lost a little bit of its luster and kind of came back because it's only a one-game series now. How do you think that's changed the rivalry?
Well, I think it's made it less unique. It was New Mexico State was one of the few rivalries that actually play twice a year, and you got that guaranteed home game in Albuquerque and that guaranteed home game in Las Cruces. If we're, a state that has two passionate fan bases that care so much about their basketball program, I think that's really cool. You combine the passion of the fan bases with the history that both basketball programs have, to the fact that, it's not really something that a lot of other rivalries do at a conference, at least. I think it really added a lot of uniqueness to it. And I feel like that's been lost now because they only play one time a year. I'll tell you this, though, I think it's going to come back. I remember talking to Amber Burge, who was the acting AD at the time in June, and she expressed interest in it coming back. When I got to talk to Joe Fields after his intro presser last month, he had interest in it coming back. And I do think, UNM has an interest in it coming back as well because, especially for financial reasons, you get New Mexico State coming into the building for for Albuquerque. That's always going to be a guaranteed revenue draw. Fans are going to be there, and the same is in the reverse for New Mexico State getting UNM to come to the Pan Am every season. That's, of course, they're going to be their biggest home draw of the season. So I do think it's something that should come back. I do think it's something that will come back, and I do think something is a little bit lost in this rivalry because you don't have that kind of uniqueness and that little flair of, hey, we play twice a year, while other non-conference rivalries only play each other once. It's just become like other non-conference rivalries now, which is a little sad.
Yeah.
Eric, you're muted.
We are speaking with Nick Coppola with the Las Cruces Sun News. Nick, we always appreciate you jumping on. But I do have one question, non-basketball specific, but with conference realignment, right? Pac-12, Mountain West, it's kind of all over. But New Mexico State's name gets thrown out a lot, right? With like joining either one. I think there's a lot of talking heads on Twitter and social media. I don't know if we've ever really heard from someone kind of in your shoes with that covers the program so closely, what the talkings are there. Like what are you hearing on campus? What are people hoping for in Las Cruces? Obviously they probably want to be in a bigger conference where there's more notoriety and not get left behind. But I mean, what's your general opinion on that whole discussion, and where do you think New Mexico State fits in the conversation?
Yeah, so I'll tell you this. I think, if that move were to present itself, especially if they were to be able to join the Mountain West, I think it's something that New Mexico State would jump at. I think it's something that leadership would want to jump at. Here's why I think it doesn't happen. One, I don't think there's mutual interest. I don't think that the Mountain West wants New Mexico State in its conference because, it's important. Like, you're a conference commissioner. You want all your members in the conference to generally be on the same kind of playing field with resources and with facilities. And, New Mexico State's, they've upgraded their facilities a little bit in recent years. The new football facility that they new have is, night and day compared to the old one that they have. It actually feels like an FBS facility instead of just a low FCS or a D2 one now. So they have been working to do that. And of course they try to do it every time the capital outlet stuff comes around every single year. But overall, they match more facilities wise, resources wise, money wise with their peers in Conference USA than they do in the Mountain West. And so I feel like if you are the Mountain West commissioner or you part of Mountain West leadership and you add New Mexico State in, they don't really fit as much with facilities and resources and revenue wise with the rest of the conference, most of them at least. And they fit with Conference USA a little bit more. And, you want your teams to have similar experiences like, New Mexico, the Mountain West wants New Mexico to have the same experience when they go to, Nevada and UNLV and Wyoming and UTEP when they come into the conference next season. And so that's something that's very important. And, other teams in the Mountain West, you want them to have the same experience when they come to New Mexico, when they go to other places. And, New Mexico State doesn't have terrible facilities, but I mean, their financial struggles in athletics are pretty well known at this point. And, it's just something that's going to hold them back, I think, from getting an invite to a conference like the Mountain West. I would love to see it happen personally. I think, certainly New Mexico State fans would love to see, getting to be in a conference with New Mexico, and then when UTEP, when they join and getting to be on the same kind of geographical plane as the teams in the Mountain West are compared to teams in Conference USA when you got to go to Florida and Virginia and Tennessee and Delaware now. But I know it gets thrown out a lot, but I feel like it mostly just gets thrown out by fans and people who think they're in the know. And I feel like I'm in the know, and I don't think it's going to happen.
I think the UTEP thing is a little interesting too, because I mean, they're less than 45 minutes away from Las Cruces, so that they have their own established rivalry. Where do you think New Mexico State, in terms of facilities and budget and resources, kind of measures up against a UTEP? Because UTEP would be, in my mind, kind of in a similar situation demographically, graphically, like in that same area that would kind of fit within the Mountain West footprint. But do you see New Mexico State kind of being on the same playing field with a UTEP?
I think in terms of, competitiveness, actually just on the field and things like that, I think they are kind of on a similar playing field, but I think that the UTEP probably a little more better off financially, not by so much as if they're on different tiers. But I think, if they're going to choose one team from that little borderland, Las Cruces, El Paso market, if you're a conference commissioner, UTEP makes maybe a little bit more sense because they do have maybe a little bit extra revenue. Generally, facilities wise, they're a little bit better. And I do know that UTEP makes a little more revenue for athletics than NMSU. So maybe that's why they wanted to do UTEP, and that's why they wanted them in the conference. So I mean, I think if UTEP goes in, I think it would also make sense for NMSU to go in as well. But like I said, that's just my opinion. That's just not something that I'm hearing from other people. And I think it'd be a good move for the Mountain West if they were to add New Mexico State. But I get the Mountain West perspective, and that's kind of the logic I use for why I don't think it's going to happen. And I certainly haven't heard anything about it either.
Well, Nick, we're going to let you go. Nick, Nunez, Ed, do you guys have any last final thoughts for?
No, I don't. Thanks for doing it, Nick. Really appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, same, Nick. I hope to be there in Las Cruces, so I'll try to find you and come say hello.
Of course, yeah. Thank you.
His name is Nick Coppola with the Las Cruces Sun News. We'll be right back to wrap up the show. Thanks for watching us live.
Because Capital Ford is celebrating 60 years in business, we're holding a very special signature sales event where we're rolling out our strongest offers of the year on every new Ford car, truck, and SUV in stock, like a new 2025 Ford Bronco Sport. Lease today for just $399 a month or 0% APR for 60 months, plus no payments for 90 days on a new 2025 Ford F-150. But hurry, this signature sales event is for a limited time at Capital Ford in Santa Fe.
Welcome back to the Pit Press Live. Just some final comments, some thoughts on the guests tonight. We were really thankful to get Geoff Grammer with the Albuquerque Journal and Nick Coppola with the Las Cruces Sun News, two beat writers who cover both of their respective programs really closely. So it's always interesting to get their perspective because they follow the programs so closely. But before we do, I kind of want to wrap up the show and just let everyone know that we might be coming live on Saturday for a Lobo morning howl to kind of preview the Colorado State UNM football game. And then we do have a newsletter on our website that will be coming out too. Please visit our website at www.thepitpressnm.com. The newsletter's free. We have some discounts in there coming from some of our corporate sponsors, stuff like that. So we kind of just a weekly recap of stuff we cover over the week in terms of articles. Nick's been writing for us a lot. Greg Archuleta's been covering UNM football a lot. So kind of a collective of our content. So go subscribe. It really helps us. We appreciate it. But Nick, Ed, any final thoughts, comments on Geoff and Nick joining us this evening?
Ed, go ahead.
I got to say for Nick Coppola, we had a cold tonight, man. I got to give him, he was sniffling and he still wanted to be here and join us. And I think with the Aggies, and son, I've never been down there, so I'm excited for you to go down to the Pan Am Center, man. And as much as I've been a Lobo fan for years, I've never made that trip. So I'm glad you're going down there, and you can report to us. But I think in listening to Nick, the Aggies are the same place the Lobos are. New system, new coach. I'm sorry, Coach Hooten's not a new coach, but it's new players. They're getting used to each other. They don't know what they have yet. But when you put the Aggies and Lobos in the same venue and same arena and the same whatever field, they'll find out real quick because that rivalry, and some of the players don't know about it, but they'll find out about it. and the adrenaline starts ramping up. So I thought having Nick on to talk about New Mexico State and where they're at. They've only played 2 games. They're like the Lobos. We don't, although New Mexico's probably played a little bit better, but I'm anxious to see how the Lobos play on the road. And this student section should be, like I said, at full throat on Saturday. I'm anxious to see how New Mexico handles that. None of these players are from New Mexico. We asked Jake Hall about the rivalry the other night, and he's like, I can't wait. I don't think they have any clue until that ball is tipped up. And, Eric and Nick, you've both been in games where you're adrenaline and you really want to, Nick, your rivalry. I remember you playing St. Mike's when you were a junior, drawing a charge at the end. Really big play there. There's certain games you played at. The adrenaline when you played against Espanola was Academy. Academy was a natural Pius rivalry. Eric, you had your rivalries in high school. I think rivalry games mine was against Sandia and Albuquerque High. Always wanted to win those games, and you got a little bit more oomph. So I'm kind of anxious to see how both teams who are very new handle this on Saturday.
Yeah, Eric, I think the rivalry between New Mexico State and UNM, it's as hot as ever, right? I mean, the last couple years, just the intense games that have gone down to the wire. That Donovan Dent layup in a one-possession game when the Lobos defeated the Aggies 2 years ago. And then New Mexico State gets UNM in the pit after they shot the ball phenomenally well. Robert Carpenter and Christian Cook just absolutely torched the Lobos. But to Geoff Grammer's point earlier, this is a pretty old UNM team. I think 2 or 3 players have been asked, what are your thoughts on the rivalry? Dad, you shared Jake Hall's comments. Chris Howell was like, I've played in intense environments before. I'm not sure what intense environments he got in the Big West. I'm sure there's a few. I'm not familiar with them. But, I think Coach Olin's team is approaching this just like, any other road game. They don't have the same investment in the rivalry that we do as fans. But I think they're going to be prepared, ready to play.
Yeah. Well, guys, it was fun tonight. Again, thankful for Geoff and Nick for joining us on the Pit Press Live. And I guess, Ed, we'll talk and see if we want to do something Saturday morning to preview UNM, Colorado State football.
One quick comment on that, Eric, if I could. Just one quick comment. Jason Eck has asked for 25. He wants 25,000 fans there. And hopefully they, I think, son, you said that they had sold maybe 20. So I hope that, I don't think they should have to beg for that, considering it's going to be a nice day. The team has played really well. So I hope the fans get out there and support the Lobo football team, because this is a team that is fun to watch. And Coach X said it. Nice weather. They've made you can practically walk in. They've kids for free. So I hope that the fans in this community get behind this football team, who's far exceeded any expectations any of us probably had. So I really hope, and hopefully, Eric, you and I and Greg Archuleta can break that down a little bit, maybe a brief, preview on Saturday morning.
Yeah, more to come on that. But for myself, Eric Moulton, Ed Nunez, Nick Nunez, we appreciate everyone for tuning into the Pit Press Live. We will talk to you the next time. Have a good evening.